Hey beloveds, how are you doing? So let's talk about when it doesn't work out, when you get fired, when you get let go, laid off, dismissed, restructured out, whatever you want to call it. The point is you're not working there anymore, okay? And sometimes maybe you're the one that quit, okay? Um, the thing is, when you're applying to a new job after you get let go, fired, whatever, when you're applying to a new job, many times that employer is going to want to know, why did you leave the other job? They're going to want to they're going to want to know these things, and some of them may even ask you point blank. It's usually not in the interview when they ask you, but they may ask you in the job application. They may have a question that says, "Have you ever been fired?" Um, and sometimes they'll have a question that says, have you ever been asked to resign? When I started doing this like almost 20 years ago, if you were asked to resign, you were actually safe, because resigning was not considered being fired. But now, I see the question, have you ever been fired or asked to resign? I see that question now because employers have wised up. They know that it's pretty much the same thing. There's some logistical things that are a little different for people who resign. Usually it's for a higher level position or something like that. There may be some severance pay involved, but pretty much they're asking you to leave because they don't want you to be working there anymore. They're no longer in need of your services for whatever the reason is. So whether you're fired or been asked to resign, it's pretty much the same thing. Sometimes getting fired is a blessing in disguise. Okay, it can be hard for some people to pull the trigger. When I work with clients, I find that, if they really like the work that they're doing, like it brings them a lot of joy. But then let's say the people are just terrible to work with, particularly if their boss is really difficult, then they're in this middle ground where they're not really happy, but they're not upset enough to pull the trigger to leave. Or vice versa. It could be the people are great, but the work that they're doing just, doesn't fill them at all. And it's really, really difficult. And they kind of feel stuck, they feel trapped. And so sometimes when you get fired and you're in this situation, it can be a blessing in disguise because you may not have otherwise have pulled the trigger yourself. Sometimes there's also this loyalty that's there. Whether or not the employer deserves the loyalty, sometimes there's this loyalty there. And even if you're being mistreated, the loyalty is so strong, like you will stay anyway. So if you get fired, it's actually can be a blessing in disguise because, if they're mistreating you, but you're loyal, then it's probably good that you got fired because now you're in a better situation. You're not being mistreated anymore. I want to talk a little bit about abusive workplaces as well. Since we're talking about being mistreated, I feel that, well, first off, I'm a career consultant. I'm a HR professional, but I'm also a clinical sociologist. And the way I look at things, the lens in which I work and that I perceive things have some quirks in it. And I perceive the relationship that we have with our career, with our job, very similarly to the relationship that we will have in other areas of our life. Particularly, let's just use romantic relationships, for example. In a romantic relationship, which is a very important, relationship, there could be abuse there. And sometimes that's reflected. That can just mirror the way our workplace life relationship is. For example, our workplace could tell us things like, if you leave me, no one else will hire you. You need me to pay your bills. Are you really, willing to risk your healthcare benefits? Of course not. So you need to stay and work with us. So the same kind of things that can get someone to stay in an abusive work relationship are very similar to the same things that get people to stay in abusive relationships that are romantic. In any relationship, particularly, let's just, again, stick with romantic relationships. There's this time investment. You invest a lot of time in someone else when it comes to a romantic relationship. There's this aspect of loyalty there. You have some kind of commitment with this person. who we are with romantically, it does in many ways help us to define who we are. Are we in a relationship with a doctor, with a musician, a rock star, with a wielder, with a contractor, with a carpenter, whatever it is? Who we're in a romantic relationship with has some alignment with how we perceive ourselves and how we identify. And it's the same thing with our job. The kind of employer that we have, it impacts how we perceive ourselves and how we identify. Are we employed by, a fancy hospital that has this great reputation, or are we employed by this little no-name, doctor's office that does, whatever? So who we are in a work relationship with helps to impact how we perceive ourselves. So again, this is very complex, and in any relationship, any healthy relationship, there's supposed to be some sort of, give and take. And so if you're in a unhealthy relationship with your employer, you're giving more than they're giving you, and that cannot be healthy. So just think about that. I would just encourage you to think about that. And on this topic of it's my cat here. You see him? Can you see him? Hey. You can't really see him. That's Gabriel. I decided to sit today because when I was planning about what I was going to say, it ended up being a little longer than usual, so I decided to bring my little chair out. So anyway, we were talking about, and my cat Gabriel's hanging out with me. So we were talking about romantic relationships and how that can align to the workplace and being let go and being fired. So there's this term in human resources called constructive discharge, and it's usually found in like employment law cases where so terrible, like so uncomfortable, so hostile that an employee is forced to resign. They're forced to say, you know what, I just can't work here anymore. And so an employer may try to say that they don't owe unemployment because they didn't fire the person. The person quit because they wanted to. But a judge will look at that case and say, no, they were constructively discharged because you made the work environment so bad that they were forced to quit. Okay? And so when we think about romantic relationships, I know in my own relationships in the past, I've been constructively discharged. I don't think I've ever had someone tell me, oh, I don't want to be with you anymore. And I wish they would have, but instead I got constructively discharged. Now I've been married for over 10 years, so this is back in the day. But pretty much, they just made the relationship so annoying that I was like, no, I don't want to be in this anymore. And it's like, it's not a good fit. And they're like, okay, great, because I didn't want to tell you. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? So anyway, there's constructive discharge, just like it can happen in the workplace. It can happen in romantic relationships. And some of y'all may be poking fun at me and, about my little example, but let me tell you this, right? Some of you all, may not be you, but some of you all may have been restructured out of your romantic relationship because your partner, decided about new values and they wanted to live their life differently. And when they restructured that and reprioritized, you didn't fit anymore. And so sometimes that happens, just like it happens in the workplace. And when we're let go, when it doesn't work out, again, it can be a blessing in disguise. And so let me just tell you this. Let's just do some takeaways because I'm wrapping up here. The same dynamics that play in the workplace relationships that we have are the same or very similar dynamics that play in like romantic relationships. Any relationship that's important, that matters, that you invest time and energy into. So again, it can be a blessing in disguise if you get let go. Also, just learning about what you like, what you don't like. Maybe you were let go because you weren't great at that work, or maybe the environment didn't work for you. That's good information to have. That's information that you can take to then use to get to where you really want to be, to better understand what your strengths and areas that you want to grow in really are. So that's good information. And then also, consider that if you were at a job for a very short time, consider not adding that to your resume. Sometimes having a gap is better than having a job where people are going to say, they weren't here for a long time. What happened? And so sometimes it can be good to consider just leaving it off. But if you are going to keep it on your resume and you were only there a short time, be ready, having practiced your reason for why you were let go or fired, okay? Practice that, because chances are an employer is going to ask you about it. And speaking of that, just don't talk bad about former employers. It's tacky, it doesn't look well. And pretty much everyone has had a bad experience with an employer. We've all had it. But to talk about it when you're in the hiring process is not appropriate. And I've never seen where it really helps anyone to do that. So if your employer was terrible, they mistreated you and had you working all these crazy hours and underpaying you, okay, you weren't a good fit. You and that employer weren't a good fit. So you could say that. But instead of going into this black hole of negativity about they did this and that, the people hiring you are going to feel like they're going to be next. You're going to leave their job at one point and talk bad about them. So just don't do it. Have all your feelings. They're valid. But, during the hiring process, it's not a good time to share those feelings. There's other ways, and this is something I help people with, how to articulate why you've left a job, how to articulate, why some place wasn't a good fit so that it makes sense and it's professional, because it's okay for things not to work out sometimes. And then I'll just kind of go back to my example about when I was constructively discharged from a couple of relationships. So, at the time I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But in hindsight, I'm so glad I got constructively discharged. I got fired from those relationships, because the longer I would have stayed in those relationships, the longer I would have been away from my dream spouse. So by getting out of that relationship, those relationships I had in the past, by, not sitting in that space for a long time, that got me to where I wanted to be much sooner. Okay. So when you get fired from some place, if you get let go, when when that's done, that time in your life is done, you're ready to move on, and you're going to have that much more information about yourself and who you are and what you like and what you don't like, so that it helps you to find that next thing that's meant for you. The longer you stay in a space where you're not really meant to be, where you're not happy, that's bad. And so I'm glad I got discharged when I did, because that got me to where I want to be sooner. It got me to my dream spouse sooner, which I've been with for over 10 years. And so, things can be a blessing in disguise. And it's not about, sometimes we can't control things, but it's about how you perceive things. They say don't yuck on another person's yum. So one person can be single, let's say, and love to be home and have, be able to do whatever they want and make noise and leave their stuff out, and they're happy. And then another person can be alone and then feel isolated and alone and, sad about it. So the same situation, two people can look at very differently. So it's about your perspective on things. And so when you get fired and let go, how are you going to choose to spend your energy? Are you going to be like, oh, this sucks and, blah, blah? Or are you going to say, you know what, this sucks. I'm going to sit in this space for a little bit, and then I'm going to get out and use my energy to do something else and to find what's really meant for me. And that's what I encourage you all to do. Okay. Have your feelings, be in that space, but don't linger in it. Bad things happen and there's pain, but what I don't want is for you to suffer. Okay, that's different. I don't want you to suffer. Okay, feel that pain, that disappointment, that, this happened, and then let's move on. Okay. I can't tell you how long you need to sit in that pain. That's something that's, your own spirit, your own heart. But, when you're ready to get out of it, I'm here to help you to stop suffering and to find that joy that's out there. So anyway, take care, y'all. See you next time, and leave me a comment, questions. I'm always happy to answer. Take care. Bye-bye.